I miss old PS2 games. One of my favorite game series of all time was released on the PS2, and the PS2 was probably my most played console when I was growing up. So I decided that for the next game slash games that I would play through, that I would play the Devil May Cry series. At least the first through the fourth one. I actually already played the fifth one because it was on Game Pass, and I had always been interested in playing it, so I decided to play it while it was free whenever I had Game Pass. I'll start off by saying that the PS2 is just such a great era for older games. The controls aren't just like absolutely terrible like in some slightly older 3D games, and the graphics are overall pretty charming and like nostalgic. Kind of brings me back to that feeling of sitting in my room late at night and playing them on a CRT TV. The only negative I can think of control wise for this game is the fixed camera angles, even though that's not really a control, I guess. It feels kind of weird if you aren't used to them, but honestly, other than that, they felt pretty smooth and responsive, and I had a lot of fun with the combat. There were some frustrating times where I felt that the camera placement caused kind of a lack of depth perception, which is usually just something that happens to me when I play games with fixed camera angles. I don't know if it happens to anyone else, but especially during like platforming sections, I just can't gauge as well how far I need to like push the stick in order to jump, or even sometimes the direction. There's also that thing that can happen where the camera angle suddenly changes when it transitions. You are still holding the stick in like one direction, but now you're technically holding it in the wrong direction, so your character will like turn around. But that's just something that is expected in games with fixed camera angles. You have essentially two forms of attack. The first being your melee weapon, and the second being your ranged weapon. You start off with the Force Edge, which is essentially just like a basic sword. There's not really any special abilities or anything like that that you can use. And then you also have Ebony and Ivory, which are just Dante's kind of iconic pistols that he uses. You attack using your melee weapon with a single button, and you use your ranged weapon by pressing down on the right bumper and pressing what is normally the interact button. But when the bumper is pressed, then you lock onto your enemy and you can use a ranged weapon. Otherwise, you can't shoot the guns or any ranged weapon at all unless you're locked on to an enemy. Any combos with the melee weapon are performed using like a combination of the melee button, the bumper, the ranged weapon button, and like pushing the control stick in a specific direction sometimes. There are some combos that you do by, well, I can really only think of like one attack that you do by delaying your press of the melee button again, instead of just like spamming it over and over. But each combo that you do kind of contributes to your overall combat rating that you get, which is something I think people are pretty familiar with. If you've played Devil May Cry before, it's the same thing that's in, like, if you've only played the fifth one, then you would know. You kind of get graded based on your combat performance. So the lowest is dull, and then the highest is stylish. But I was honestly kind of confused as to what built it up and what didn't. So if you just spam super simple combos over and over, as you would expect, you would only get to like cool or bravo. Whereas a more complex combo could get you to absolute or stylish, which makes sense. But at the same time, there were some times, and it felt like specific, that if you would spam like certain attacks at maybe it has something to do with being in the devil trigger state, then you would consistently get up to at least absolute, but usually not stylish. You'd usually have to like break it and at least do like one other type of attack, but it made it really easy to get up to it sometimes. There's a bunch of different weapons you can get. Well, not really a bunch, but there's a decent amount of weapons that you can get in the game. But I really just stuck with like the first sword that you get, which is called Elastor. And then I just use Ebony and Ivory for pretty much the whole game. I just enjoyed the pistols the most. You can like juggle enemies using the pistols, which is pretty fun. I used the Ifrit, which is like these kind of like fist melee weapons that are like fire based as opposed to Elastor is like a lightning based weapon. And then there's the final sword that you get, which is Sparta. And it's supposed to be super strong, like lore wise, and that's like your dad's name, whatever, all that stuff. But you can't use your devil trigger state while you're using it, so it just felt kind of weak in comparison to Elastor. So I just never like once I got it, I didn't use it. I mean, you don't get it till the end of the game anyway, so it's not really like that big of a deal. So another part of combat was the devil trigger gauge, like I mentioned. And when you activate it, it allows you to use extra attacks. It buffs your damage and your resistance to damage. But when you run out, you can regain it by dealing damage in your normal form. It's honestly kind of broken. Most bosses take like an insane amount of damage when you use it. And there's this one ranged attack that I pretty much just abuse the entire game because you're flying, so a lot of enemies, unless they're also a flying enemy or they have some kind of ranged attack, which ranged attacks were pretty rare. If an enemy had one, they'd use it like every once in a while. It wasn't like a constant thing. It pretty much just like always hits because it's like the ranged attacks are basically like aimbot because you have to be locked on to an enemy. And it does like a good chunk of damage unless the enemy has like some kind of invulnerable state. So there's only 4 bosses, excluding the final boss in the entire game, which, I mean, I shouldn't really say only, that's not like a small amount or anything, but you fight it each at least 2 times, so it's kind of like there's more than that. A couple of them you fight 3 times, one of them you technically fight it 4 times. Um, the first you fight is Phantom, which you only fight 2 times, and he's basically just this giant spider made of magma and rock that you can only really attack his head. So you just essentially wait until there's some kind of opening and then throw everything at him. He also appears a couple other times while you're playing, and he'll just like chase you down a corridor, which is pretty cool, until you fight him for the second time. And then he's actually like dead for real. But the second one is Nello Angelo, which is first he's kind of portrayed as like a copy of yourself just because of how you meet him. He walks out of this mirror and first he looks like Dante, but then he changes into what basically looks like your devil trigger state. And I mean, he pretty much is a copy of you. So you fight him 3 times total, but he's the boss you technically fight for a 4th time, if you want to count that. He's honestly, he's not too hard, but they were probably my favorite boss fights just because they felt, I don't know, they just felt the best gameplay wise, and I enjoyed having that like one-on-one feeling of like fighting someone. He's like the same size of you. He doesn't have some like dumb BS attack that you can't dodge. or anything like that. He's just like kind of like your equal in some ways. And then the third is a griffin, which is a giant bird that shoots lightning, and he has like a bunch of faces on his head. And you fight him 3 times, and he is kind of annoying just because he's a flying boss, but still not really like that difficult. And you get to fight him in some cool locations. Like you fight him on a pirate ship, and you kind of have to climb to the top of each of the masts to fight him. Um, and you also fight him in a coliseum, which is pretty cool. The main reason I would say he's like annoying though is because there's times where he's just like off screen and you can't control the camera, so you just can't see where he is, and then he'll attack you and you can't really tell where he's attacking or what type of attack he's using. So especially in like the Coliseum, I got hit like quite a few times by him, but I still don't think that um, I didn't beat him on like my first try or anything like that. So it wasn't too bad. But the fourth boss is Nightmare. And unfortunately, my recording stopped because I ran out of storage. So I don't have the footage of the second or third time that you fight him, or even the final boss of the game for that matter, which is awesome. So I'll just show you someone else's footage and credit them. I'll also put a link to their video in the description so you can watch it if you want. It's actually from a speed run, which is a lot more impressive than anything I did here. Before I proceed, I should probably mention that you don't fight each of these bosses like 3 times in a row or 4 times in a row, whatever, like however many times you fight them. With the exception of Nightmare, is the only one that you fight like in a row, basically. So they just kind of appear until you fight them for the final time. So it'll be like, I think the first boss that you fight is Phantom, and then you'll fight Nello Angelo, and then you'll fight Phantom again, and you'll fight Nello Angelo again. But they're kind of just thrown in there. Um, but Nightmare, you get to fight him 3 times in a row. And he is by far my least favorite boss in this game, and it's not even close. So I'm probably going to go on a bit of a tangent. But I did not enjoy the boss fight at all. Basically, there are these switches that you kind of see throughout the entire game, and they cause different things to happen. Like it could raise a platform, could cause a room to fill with water. There's a few different things, but during this boss fight, they cause these circles on the floor to shoot out this like rainbow light. And when the fight first starts, Nightmare spawns as this like big pile of goop that has like bones in it and whatever. And he'll send these like little worm things at you, and they attach to you like they're the Flood from Halo. Unless you activate this switch on the wall by smacking it. So like the switch that can do whatever. You can do it with like 2 attacks, so it's not too bad. But what happens when you activate that is like the rainbow lights come on, whatever, and he turns into this like big tank creature thing. And the only way to deal damage to him is while he's like that. So you can't deal damage to him while he's like the puddle of goop, like ever. I mean, at least he was never a puddle of goop long enough for me to figure out if you could. So you might be thinking that, okay, that sounds pretty easy. Just make sure the switches don't run out, like, because after a few seconds they expire. But you can't just attack him while he's like that. You have to wait until this little orb pops out of him, which only happens during or after an attack. For some attacks, as soon as he is done attacking, it goes back inside and you can't deal damage to him. But for most of like the bigger ones, it'll stay out for a little bit after. So that kind of ruled out the attack that I spammed the entire game, which I mean is probably good, but when it stays out, so usually after he does an attack, if the orb stays out, then it will also drain your devil trigger gauge. So essentially, you have this limited amount of time that he's in a form where he can attack, and then when he attacks, you have a limited amount of time to attack him. And he also is draining your devil trigger gauge, so you can't like really use it sometimes because he'll be like all out of it. Um, it was weird. I don't know how it worked, but it didn't seem like he would drain it until like after you used it for the first time, so you could at least use it like one time. Um, but honestly, I mean, at the end of the day, it was probably a good thing that they included him because it actually forces you to pay attention and make sure you're dodging and timing attacks. Um, but you're gonna fight him 2 more times after this, and each time the room that you're in, it gets a little bit more cramped. And I would honestly say the final fight with him was easier than the first and the second because he like sucks you into this dimension where you fight all these skulls and then you get to fight um Nello Angelo for the fourth time. But he's like way easier. He has like way less health. You can just go into Devil Trigger and like just keep wailing on him until he dies. But yeah, he's definitely my least favorite boss. But then the final boss is Mundus. And he's a lot different from the other bosses, which I mean, you kind of expect since he's the final boss. But um, so, first, now you can use Devil Trigger with Sparta. But what it does is it sends this giant dragon at him, dealing like a bunch of damage. And the first phase of the fight, you're actually flying. And it's basically like an on the rails shooter. So he has these like orbs that you have to shoot at and destroy, and then it breaks like his shield. And then you can attack him with either your devil trigger or just like keep shooting at him. But then he also has a second phase, as all great final bosses do. And his second phase, he's basically surrounded by lava and these like rotating platforms, and you kind of just have to like get to him and deal as much damage as you can to him. There's like other things that you can do, like I mean, I'm sure there's like more strategy to it than that if you really want to like get down to the nitty gritty of it. But I just used this item that's called Untouchable, and basically what it does is it makes you invincible and also puts you in Devil Trigger state until it runs out. So I just used that, and then I just ran through the lava and just smacked on him until I got almost all of his health gone, and then I used just like my guns, and I think I ran up to him like one more time to finish him off. So now that I got everything else out of the way, I'll talk about the story. So spoilers for the story if you care. Um, at the beginning of the game, this woman breaks into the Devil May Cry headquarters or office, whatever, and basically she just like smashes through the front wall and just attacks Dante out of nowhere. Which he survives, and she, whatever, she's like, I actually don't want to fight you. I actually came here for your help, basically, and like introduces herself as Trish. And then Dante notices that she looks like his mom, and she brings him to this island because they need to stop the Mundus, basically. They need to stop him. So they go to the island, and then she's like, okay, I'll meet up with you at the castle. But then she just like disappears for like the whole game, basically. And she might show up like a couple of times. I mean, I honestly don't really remember if she did. If she did, it didn't really affect the story until she like shows up later. So basically, you make your way through the castle, you do all that stuff. There's not really anything happening story wise. until you have defeated Nello for the final time, and you find out that he was actually in possession of the other half of the amulet that Dante had. So Dante kind of has this like mental flashback, remembering how him and his brother Virgil were each given half of this amulet. So I think that so it's like you're supposed to notice like, okay, so this is actually like Virgil that you've been fighting all this time, and that's like Dante's brother that he thought was dead. And then he's having this mental flashback, so surely he's like aware that this is his brother. But then he he just like doesn't care, I guess. I don't know. Like he's not like, oh, my brother's actually alive, or oh, I just like killed my brother if he thinks he's dead. Like, I mean, obviously he's not dead. If you know anything about Devil May Cry, you know he's not dead. But um, so I don't know. I guess he just like doesn't care. So next they show the next cutscene, like right after that. It shows Mundus and Trish, or maybe it was before. I don't remember. Uh, and it shows like that they're actually working together. So, I guess double plot twist. The boss was actually his brother, and then Trish is actually a bad guy. So, when you're fighting Nightmare for like the third time, the last time you fight him, then she tries to help him by like trying to like shoot you with her like lightning power, which doesn't work, and you defeat him. And then this giant pillar almost falls on her and crushes her. So Dante saves her just before she's crushed. And I mean, it's not like we've seen like how durable she is, but Dante has literally like pulled himself through a sword and survives like multiple times. So I feel as though like Trish should be like kind of on that level. I mean, clearly Dante's like superhuman. So why was she like so scared of this random ass pillar that was about to fall on her? She thought she was gonna die. Like, surely she could have just like zapped it out of the way or something like that. But anyway, then Dante tells her to leave. He's like pissed off at her because he's like, you're a bad guy. So you progress a little bit further, and then you're confronted by the giant Mundus statue. And then you find that he's captured Trish. So now he's captured her, and whatever, I guess Dante cares about her just because she looks like his mom. And she's not even like shackled in there. So basically you're about to be killed by Mundus, and she jumps in the way to save you. And so I don't know. So Dante almost gets killed. And then Trish comes down and saves him at the last second. And so she like dies. And you get this like just amazing line from Dante.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light.
There are actually some other pretty great lines, like this one.
Block off, Featherface.
It's kind of that classic, like, just PS2, like, I don't know, that era, like, dialogue. Then it's also revealed that Mundus actually, like, created Trish, and he talks about how he could, like, make as many more Trishes as he wanted to, whatever. So then you fight Mundus, you defeat him, and Dante kind of like mourns Trish before leaving his sword Sparta behind, and then he like flees the underworld. The whole place is crumbling down around you, but as you're leaving, Mundus tries to kill you again. And so then, Dante just faces off against him one last time. And when you're like about to kill him, then, Trish comes back, and she's actually alive, and she's like, gives you some of her power, and then you use her power to like finish him off. But then the place is still crumbling down. So there's this like biplane, and you see it at like the very beginning of the game. And they use the biplane to escape from inside, flying through this cave. They just fly at the biplane, and that's how they escape. So then they escape, and then Dante and Trish have this like heart-to-heart, whatever, they're talking to each other. She's talking about how like the sky is so blue, like acting like she's never seen it before, but like obviously she's seen the sky because like she came to get Dante. So I don't know. Anyway, so then it cuts back to the Devil May Cry like office, whatever. Except now it's called Dever Never ugh, Devil Never Cry because Trish cried earlier in the game, and Dante said like that a devil would never cry. So she must actually be like a good person. And then like Trish and Dante bust out of there, and they go on a job together, and the end. Basically, that's the end of it. So honestly, not a bad story at all. It had those like classic PS2 era corny lines. There was like a lot of them. The dialogue was pretty funny. So, um, but I think it was pretty good. Personally, I'd probably rate this game like an 8.5 out of 10. I actually enjoyed it a lot. So the combat was really fun. Even if it was like a little bit repetitive and the story wasn't bad, I honestly just wish that it was like longer, if anything else. I beat the entire game in like 4 hours, but I mean, you could easily do it quicker if you weren't like fumbling around like I was. There are other difficulties too, so it's like after you finish it, it's kind of like New Game Plus. Like you just go into the new difficulty when you reload your save file. But I don't usually like instantly replay a game after beating it just because I don't have like a ton of free time. So I usually just like play a different game instead. But yeah, it was pretty good. Anyway, thank you if you watched the video this far. I plan on playing at least 2, 3, and 4. So if you're interested in those videos, then I'll post those as soon as I finish playing this. I'll probably start playing the second one as soon as this video is up. So thanks for watching.